Greetings and welcome back to the Casual Wargamer. Continuing a look at the recent Warhammer 40k 10th edition faction focus reviews. And the next one up is the Adeptus Mechanicus. Now, I have to be honest, don't really know a lot about these guys. I've only ever faced them twice, and both times it was mid 8th edition, and I was playing Death Guard at the time, and they basically ruffle stomped my poor Plague Marines into the dirt, and I found them rather strong, a little too strong maybe, but at the same point realising if they didn't have that, they had nothing. So I don't really know what they're like under 9th at the moment, but I know they certainly seem to have fell out of favour with a lot of players, and hopefully 10th might bring them sort of like back in again. So they've given us this preview, some lovely artwork and stuff, and I should say pictures. And the first thing we get hit with is the army rule for any Mechanicus force, which is the Doctrina Imperatives, and I like these. I think this is quite flavourful. So at the start of the battle round, you choose whether your army is in the Protector Imperative or the Conqueror Imperative. So it's basically whether you are telling your army to hunker down, stay put, and blast the enemy as they come in. And in this one, the Protector Imperative gives your weapons the heavy ability, so you're hitting with that +1 if they haven't moved. And if the opponent shoots one of your units in your deployment zone, their AP drops by 1. It gives you that first turn sort of little bit of protection if you don't get the first turn. But if you really need it, it gives you the opportunity to go, I'm not advancing, I'm sitting here, I'm just going to blast you off of the table as quickly as possible. Likewise, the Conqueror Imperative means all your ranged weapons have the Assault Special rule, and if you target a unit in your opponent's deployment zone, your AP increases by 1. It's a much more, I'm at the point now I'm going up the table. I want to basically punch my way into your deployment zone. Now, obviously, these are both good, but they may be good or bad or indifferent based on whatever mission you have or whatever cards you draw for your mission. As we haven't seen enough of that yet, it's hard to say, but I think this is quite flavourful as a default army mechanic. The next thing you see is the detachment rule for the Rad cohort detachment, which is Rad bombardment. So basically, at the start of the game, you are nuking your opponent's deployment zone with highly radioactive weapons, which is quite cool. And this works in in 2 ways. On the first battle round, your opponent has to decide whether each individual unit is going to stand firm and be ready, or if they're going to take cover. If they take cover, then they are considered battle shocked for the rest of the battle round. So they can't hold objectives. But if they stand firm, they have to roll a d6. So that unit on a 3+, they take d3 mortal wounds. So if we look at that, depending on the army, that could be a potential loss of 2 to 3 guardsmen, gaunts, what have you, or one and a bit space marine sort of thing. I think it's quite flavourful, but I think it's going to be a bit of a decision for an opponent. Sitting here right now, I look at that and I think, what would my Marines do in this situation? Obviously, I don't want to take D3 mortal wounds on potentially D3 mortal wounds on every unit, but at the same point, I don't want to not be able to hold objectives. It depends, I suppose, on how the missions work. What your setup is and so forth. But I think that's going to give people pause for thought on how they want to do it. Also, the size of the game is going to make a bit of a difference. You might choose to protect some units whilst risking others. Yeah. However, from Battle Round 2 onwards, you roll a d6 for each enemy unit in your opponent's deployment zone, and on a 3+, they take a mortal wound. So you're forcing your opponent to come out of their deployment zone towards you, or at least into no man's land, or they're going to start taking mortal wounds. Which, again, not so bad for like a MEQ, but your little squads are going to be losing a model. You know, your guardsmen, gaunts, whatever, orcs, are going to lose a model and blah. So again, your opponent's got to decide: does he stay put, or is he going forwards? If he goes forwards, then he's potentially putting himself in the range of your doctriners, imperatives. And you could just sit there and go, right, you're coming at me, I'm just going into the protected doctrine, and I'm just going imperative, and I'm just going to go boom, 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 hitting on 2s or 3s, whatever it happens to be. So yes, just by looking at that, I think that's a nice mechanic. It's potentially quite strong, I would say, but certainly quite interactive. Your opponent isn't just going to sit there while you shoot. They've got to make a decision based on how you've decided to start the game, and whether they're going to stay put in their deployment zone or risk coming at you. It makes it a little bit more interactive between you and your opponent, especially if it's not their turn, which is one of the kind of the flaws a little bit that people have said under 8th and 9th. But we shall see. The first unit preview we have are the Skitarii Vanguard. At first glance, they don't look anything special. They are your default battle lines. However, the weapons are nice. There's nothing too bad in there. It's quite reasonable. They are reasonably high strength. They are looking at wounding probably most things 2s or 3s, but the AP is not so bad and the damage is fairly basic. But it's when you get to their abilities, and they have a thing called Rad Saturation. So while an enemy unit, excluding vehicles, is within 3 inches of this unit, subtract 1 from their objective control characteristic of models in that unit. So it's making it a little bit easier for these guys, although they might not necessarily want to be up there in face-to-face over an objective with the enemy, but it's giving you the ability to control who controls that objective. So maybe these will be your battle line option, depending on what other ones you get, which I think is going to be Rangers. I'm not 100% on Mechanicus. The war gear abilities, enhanced data tether. So each time you select the bearer's unit as a target of a stratagem, you roll a dice. On a 5+, you get a CP. That's nice. That's controlling the CP cost of things, because effectively you could get a point back or some of it back. And omnispecs, so your ranged weapons would have ignored cover. That's really nice. 6+ invulnerable save as well, when they have a 5+ normal. So they're a unit that's probably going to get blasted as soon as possible by the enemy, but it seems to be reasonable as a default option. Now, the next thing down they give us is the Sicarian Ruststalker's Optimized Gate, where they get +1 to advance and charge rolls made for the unit, but if they're within 6 inches of a Mechanicus battle line unit, they get 2 to that advance and charge instead. So kind of trying to get your army to have a little bit of connectivity. You'd want them starting near the Skitarii Vanguard so that they get that initial bonus to their charge or their advance. You're kind of using your army to support itself as it goes up the table. Why they sort of drop that into the middle of that, I'm not in of the page, I'm not really sure, but there you go. Then we get the big boy, Belisarius Call. Now, what can I say about him? He is a epic hero. He's a named character. He doesn't strike me as being up there with the likes of Abaddon or the Primarchs. He just doesn't seem to have the offensive ability that they do. The solar atomizer that he has is his only ranged weapon is nice, but it's only an 18-inch range. It's not going to be blasting people off the table. The melee weapons that he's got, so you get to choose between the Arc Scourge. Oh, sorry, I tell a lie. You've got the Omniscient Axe and then Arc Scourge and Mechindrite Hive. I didn't realise the Arc Scourge actually had extra attacks until now. So you will get to attack with all three of these, which makes a bit of a difference. Even so, although he's got a good weapon skill, he's hitting on 2s and 3s for the Hive, and wounding quite nicely. The AP isn't too high and the damage isn't too high. If something gets into combat with him, he's probably going to deal with it if it's not a marine or a monstrous creature. He could probably smack his way through the infantry type units though. But it's his abilities that make him stand out to me. So he has Canticles of the Omniscient. Start of the battle round, you select one of the 3 Canticles of the Omniscient. So like the other big characters, he has 3 abilities, and you can choose one. And that lasts for the battle round. You can give friendly Mechanicus units within 6 inches a reroll to hit of 1 with Invocation of Machine Vengeance. Mantra of Discipline. Your Mechanicus units within 6 inches of call, if they take a battle shock or a leadership test, they can re-roll it. And lastly, you have Shroud Psalm to give friendly Mechanicus units within 6 stealth. Nothing amazing as it stands, but handy, which is always nice. He has the Mechanicus Bodyguard rule, so if he's in 3 inches of a friendly Mechanicus unit, he has lone operative, and you can't just pick him out, even though he's like 10 feet tall and obviously the guy in charge. But I say that about Guilliman. And lastly, he has self-repair mechanisms, so in your command phase, he heals D3 wounds. Unlike the other big characters we've seen, he's not likely to be charging up the table. You're going to be using him for those bonuses for the Canticles more than anything. If the enemy gets close enough, then yes, he's going to blast D3 of them with his slightly more because it's blast with his solar atomizer, and he can probably just about hold his own in combat if he really wanted to. I don't think you're going to want to charge him into combat unless you have to. So for the big name characters, he doesn't strike me as being one of the better ones, but I think he's less useful than the likes of the Primarchs or Abaddon. But still nice. 4-up save and a 2-up armor save and a 4-up invulnerable save. He's still going to be tough to bring down. The last 2 things in the preview are the Eradication Beamer, which is quite nice. Two choices of fire, dissipated and focused. Both are blast and sustained hits D3. D6 attacks hitting on 4s, 3s if it hasn't moved, and you're using the Protector Imperative. Pretty much wounding most things on a 2 or 3, vehicles 5s. A -2 AP at the longer range, -3 at short range, 2 damage, 3 damage. It's going to be good at blasting units, not so good against vehicles. And lastly, we have 2 stratagems, the Aggressor Imperative and the Bulwark Imperative. And they're kind of flip sides of one another. The Aggressor Imperative, when you charge, one Skitarii unit from your army that has advanced is eligible to charge even though advanced, but only if you've got the Conqueror Imperative in effect. And the opposite, the Bulwark Imperative, is in your opponent's shooting phase after an enemy unit has selected its targets. You can nominate 1 Skitarii unit in your army that has been targeted to get a 4-up invulnerable, but only if the Protector Imperative is in play. So again, it's playing off of the army special rule, which is nice. There's some consistency and interaction between its own rules. Very nice. I still don't know what to make of Mechanicus. As I say, I haven't really played against them. I don't really know them that well, but this looks like a nice, strong, synergized army. That's the word I've been trying to think of all video. Synergized. I think it's going to work well in that regards. We still need to see a little bit more of what they're like, which hopefully we'll get as the previews go forward, and we see different things that aren't just faction focuses. But I think Mechanicus players are probably going to be happy with this faction going into 10th. Anyway, what are your thoughts on this preview? Good, bad, indifferent? Are you a Mechanicus player? How do you feel about it? Are you pleased or not with this? Either way, pop your comments down below, see what you think. Give the vid a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button if you haven't already, and I will see you guys in the next vid. Until then, take care, good gaming.